Among Us has been on the internet for a while now. In fact, the trend is now dying. So you might be wondering why I'm uploading this video now. Let me know if you figure it out. I started off by making the 3D model of the femureless parachute wearing astronauts. I took a sphere, cut it in half, applied the mirror modifier, took two cylinders and turned them into legs, did some more fancy stuff and then applied colors. I greatly suck at making 3D models, which resulted in this. I then exported the model and imported it into Unity, but it was looking kind of bad because of default lighting. So I fixed the lighting. Just kidding, I applied a nice toon shader to the model. Then I set up a basic first person movement script so that the players could look around. I did this part all by myself without any help. Then I spent way too much time on Skybox. That was because I just couldn't get what I wanted. I then found this website out which lets you generate skyboxes based on different input values. This finally gave me the desired results. Even though this was going to be a first person perspective game, you would still be seeing other players and the character was looking kind of boring without the animations. But I also didn't have any idea on how to animate characters. So I did what any sensible game developer would do. I made them myself. With the help of animation rigging and Blender, I was able to set up some basic animations.
Bye, have a great time.
Then I took all the original audios from the game and tried to recreate them on my own. After spending a long while in Audacity and Premiere Pro, I came to the conclusion that doing sounds was not meant for me. But I also could not use the original audios as I didn't have the money to fight a lawsuit filed by Innersloth. I modified some free sounds from the internet which sounded nothing like the original ones, but it was time to move on. After this, I decided to do the fun and easy part. It was designing the map of Polus from the original Among Us. Having the exact map did give me a chance to take inspiration from the 2D map. I then carefully traced all the details of the map into a 3D structure. The tasks from the original game were pretty basic themselves, but I had no idea how to code the tasks. So, with the help of my fellow YouTubers, I was able to set up a basic demo task, just like we had in the 2D game. Everything regarding the task seemed quite confusing at first, like triggering the task, setting up the UI, setting up the functionality, upgrading the values based on the user input, and implementing all of that. In short, the task worked, but it didn't give me much idea on how to program the other tasks. They were also different from one another. Then comes something I truly hope no one ever faces, that's setting up multiplayer for your game. Now, if you don't know much about multiplayer games, let me tell you, this thing is portrayed to be extremely difficult and painful. But being a naive developer, I didn't give much thought to those reviews and jumped headfirst into the pit of multiplayer game development. I didn't have a single clue on how things work and how to make them work if they don't. I was new to developing games, let alone the multiplayer part. I have to admit, when people called this thing difficult, they weren't lying. This thing gave me actual nightmares. I started to dream about debugging the problems in my game. It really messed up with my head. The fact that there are so many ways in which multiplayer can be implemented and how different they are from each other makes it even more difficult. The most convincing way seemed to be using the Steamworks API for setting up P2P connections, but I needed to pay $100 to Steam for that. And let me take this moment to tell you that I am saving my kidney for one of my future projects. So I went with this thing that's called Photon Networking, which was really helpful for setting up connections and lobby system. I don't know if I would ever have been able to make this game without Photon. Then I figured out that I needed some sort of interface to be able to communicate with all the game logic that I have been coding. The term used for that is user interface. Making UI meant only one thing to me. It was time to unleash my Photoshop skills. After spending some time in Photoshop, I was able to cook up some trash looking UI elements, but they would work like a charm. Mostly because I could not publicly release this game and I could only play this on a small scale with my friends. Implementing the kill functionality was probably the most fun part. I got to add cool sound and particle effects. After a player is killed, the body is just left there with a single weird looking bone hanging out. Imposters are selected randomly once the room host starts the game, and the number of imposters is decided by the room host using the custom room settings. To kill someone in the game, you need to approach them, and when you are in the killing range, which is confirmed by the highlighted kill button, you just need to press F and the player would no longer be among us. The imposters know who the other imposters are by the color of their name on their heads, but for a crewmate, all the names appear in white. For some reason, I decided to create some cool looking skins for the game I was never going to release. This part was mostly fun and easy. That's because I sucked at Blender and there wasn't much scope. I spent too much time on the skins than I should have, only to realize that you cannot see your own skin as it was an FPP game. But instead of throwing all the progress away, I looked on the bright side. You get to see the skin of other players, and they get to see yours. Then I tried to figure out how could the field of view system be implemented. On finding no direct solution, a clever idea came to my mind. I used Unity's fog renderer to represent the field of view of the players in 3D. After adding the fog, I just realized that I could not see the skybox as it didn't lie inside the field of view. All the time I spent on creating the skybox was completely trashed and sent me into depression. So I decided to make some easy UI elements, the ones to be used for the use, report and kill buttons. They were looking pretty bad, but I am not a graphic designer, so we will have to work with it. I also designed a task menu which lists all the tasks for the crewmates to complete. The tasks are also mentioned on the game map. For the imposter, the task menu just asks them to kill everyone. Not that I am skilled, but one of the most challenging mechanics of this game was to make the venting system. In the original game, the player's sprite was just made invisible after an imposter vents, but for the 3D version, the position of the player had to be carefully chosen so that the imposters can be seen while venting, but they can't be seen once they are inside a vent or changing vents. I tried a lot of ways to implement this, but there always seemed to be some problem. The player won't vent, or it would vent twice and end up in the same vent even after changing the vents, but finally I got it working. You just need to be on top of a vent and press E. I have made changing the vents pretty easy. You just need to open the map and select the vent from the vent network, or alternatively, you can just look in the direction of a vent if you know its location and press the left mouse button. I am really happy with the way this turned out. The map was looking really boring with the default Pro Builder materials, so I browsed for some free models and textures and made the ones that I couldn't find. The material editor tool of Pro Builder really made it easy to add the textures. Then I tried to add all the details based on the original game to make the map look as similar to the 2D game as possible. The lava pit was definitely fun and you were thrown into it once you were voted out in the meeting. Then I for some reason decided to make literally all the other tasks that were in the map of Polis. A few of them were repeated ones so the prefabs worked just fine, but I had to work a lot on the UI and the logic of the tasks. Replicating all the tasks in a first game is definitely challenging. Something was missing. It was the crispy sound of a kill in the game, but since I decided to make everything from scratch, I tried to recreate the game audios with absolutely zero experience in audio editing. After spending days and days on terribly failing to replicate the sound, I had to work with the free versions that I thought were similar to the original ones. I just modified them for my use and chucked them into the game, and was already feeling quite bitter. Then I suddenly remembered of the Trello list that I had created at the beginning of this project, and I really don't think I have opened it after the day it was born. So I spent some time in updating the Trello list because I was trying to be organized. Most of the people developing the game with Chopper on one map and with few tasks only. But I, for some reason, decided to make all the three original maps with each and every task present in them. All this effort for a game which I cannot release. Definitely something you shouldn't do. Now comes the thing I was most afraid about. That was testing the multiplayer code. I then collected some of my friends to test the multiplayer lobby system and how the RPCs were working out. Just kidding, I don't have any friends. Mostly because I don't go out in the daylight. So I opened multiple instances of the same device to test the game. But to be true, somehow I was able to collect some actual people for the multiplayer implementation testing. There were a lot of bugs initially, but slowly and steadily I fixed them all and made the game playable. Another thing that was missing from the game was a mini-map. It just has to be there. I was pretty new to masks and Unity in general, so figuring out how to make a working mini-map took me like a decade. But the results made me pretty happy, and the fact that I figured out all the logic for it without any help meant that I should not give up game development just because developing this game gave me nightmares. Then I made the door system just like the original game. The imposters could sabotage the gates for making their tasks easy, and the crewmates or the imposters themselves had to click some switches to open the door. Snow was looking kind of invisible without the snow particles, and so I added them. The particle system of Unity is actually pretty fun to play with, so I added some lava particles as well as created the smoke effect for the automatic doors. After dying, a player could move freely across the map and complete the tasks or sabotage in the case of imposter. But the game became pretty boring for the ones that were no longer alive, as they could not participate in the proceedings of the meeting and just had to complete the tasks. They also had no idea about what other eliminated players were doing. So I made ghosts that were only visible to the dead players and they could walk right through the live players without them feeling a thing. Oh, I even made a credit scene. Overall, the project was pretty fun but extremely challenging, especially because it was technically my first project and I had no idea what I was doing most of the times. I used like three different IDEs, and I know some of you probably want to play the game, but I'm extremely sorry that I can't release the game for obvious reasons. I made this anyway as I really wanted to complete the project. If you liked the video, feel free to support, and I'll make sure that you guys can play the next game I make.